Hello, this is Craig Brelsford with Redshift. Thank you for joining today's event with Enlivex Therapeutics, which trades on the Nasdaq under the ticker ENLV. With us today, we have Oren Hershkovitz, Chief Executive Officer of Enlivex. We will begin with a presentation in a moment, and then we'll open the event to your questions. You may submit your question at any time. Click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical facts should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. With that out of the way, I now turn the webinar over to Oren.
Hi, everyone. Hope you see me well. Okay, so hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Very happy to be here. I assume most of you saw our recent press release from today, so this is very exciting time, just about time to maybe talk a little bit about that. Assuming that not all of you are well familiar with Enlivex, so I'll walk you through again through the company, but I'll try to focus on our coming milestones during 2025, talk a little bit about the data we just published today and the implications of that data, our recent announcement about adopting the Bitcoin strategy. I'll start with forward-looking statement, and I'll go through the company in general, and I'll focus on the different aspects just discussed. So for those of you who are less familiar with Enlivex is a cell therapy company, what we call the next generation cell therapy company, in the sense that we're developing and really a cutting edge new cell therapy that we call Allocetra. And it's a very, very unique and novel concept designed to reprogram specific cells that we're going to talk a little bit about, called macrophages, very important immune cells that plays a role in many different activities, but they're also playing a role during inflammatory conditions, and which make them a very interesting target to treat inflammatory diseases. So Enlivex, in that sense, is actually a completely novel, have established a completely novel therapeutic approach, novel therapeutic modality, in the sense that we target this type of immune cells called macrophages, and we reprogram them from a pro-inflammatory state into a pro-homeostatic or pro-resolution state. That's really something that only we do, and in order to do that, we use our allogeneic cell therapy platform. We're targeting different indication. This is, again, it's the platform. It is suitable for different inflammatory conditions, chronic or acute conditions, and we are targeting really substantial market that all shares a common feature, which is that they are huge, really large markets with unmet which are defined as unmet medical conditions, which means that they don't have really an effective approved drug by the FDA. And another very, very important feature of Allocetra is the fact that it's a very cost-effective cell therapy. So we have a simple manufacturing process, building a ready-to-use drug that could be thawed and injected by a physician in different clinical setting without the need to match the donors or anything like that. This makes it a very cost-effective and therefore a commercially viable option for the different indications that we are targeting. So on the right-hand side, what you see is the recent announcement that we made. So today, really just from today, we announced positive interim data from our phase 1/2 moderate knee osteoarthritis trial. We also initiated the phase 2 part of that study and announced that recently. I'll talk about it a little bit later on. We dosed the first patient in our psoriatic arthritis phase 1 study, and we also announced adopting Bitcoin treasury strategy that I'll talk a little bit about later. Sorry. So before we go a little bit into the science, I think that one of the most important thing in a biotech company is management and the experience of management. And in that sense, Enlivex has a substantial experience in taking drugs all the way from preclinical to late stage development. By management has that experience in previous companies. Chairman of Enlivex, Shai Novik, and myself collaborated in a previous company called Prolor. Later on became Opco Biologics. That company developed long-acting therapeutic drugs, and we were able to successfully develop a long-acting growth hormone for growth hormone deficiency, pediatric growth hormone deficiency. That company was acquired in 2013 for a $560 million acquisition deal, and the leading asset was then we did partner over that leading asset with Pfizer and did the co-development and late stage development of that asset all the way to submission. And it is now approved in more than 40 countries called Ngenla. And I can go on to talk about the outer management, but again, briefly, I would say that we have the experience both from the business perspective to creating shareholder value and both from the development perspective of taking drugs from preclinical all the way to approval. This goes definitely also to the board of directors of Enlivex. I will just mention Roger Pomerantz, who's our vice chairman, former worldwide head of licensing acquisition at Merck, partner at Flagship, and a lot of experience, really seasoned director in the pharma world. So, how do we do? Why and how do we do macrophage reprogramming? What is Allocetra? In few words, Allocetra is actually a cell that expresses over the membrane of the cell and eat me signals. That eat me signal is identified by a macrophage, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. When we inject Allocetra cells, an active macrophage identify our cell, engulf it, eat it, and that results in a very holistic change in that cell activity, eventually to the fact from a more inflammatory cell to become a more pro-resolution cell that later on can shift the whole immune system back into what we call homeostasis. But this is really a novel concept. It relies on a naturally occurring process. That's the beauty of our technology. It's not a very sophisticated technology that was invented in the lab. It's something that occurs in our body on a regular basis. All we do is utilize that concept in order to treat inflammatory indications and diseases that are currently considered as untreatable. The way we do, we collect the cells, we trigger that state in a very simple way, and eventually we freeze the cells, and they're ready to be used. We can inject them systemically or chronically or locally, and so on, and which makes it suitable for so many different inflammatory indications. Once again, very, very cost effective, easy to manufacture, and makes it a very attractive novel approach to treat inflammatory diseases. In terms of our clinical studies, this is our pipeline. As you can see, we currently have 5 studies ongoing. The first one is in sepsis. It's a phase 2 study. I'll talk about it. The second one, the moderate knee osteoarthritis, we just announced interim data today. We have the end stage knee osteoarthritis that we published the interim data a few months ago, and the basal thumb osteoarthritis, that's this one. Again, the study that is ongoing, we've initiated the study a few months ago, and it's ongoing, and the psoriatic arthritis, which we announced the dosing of the first patient recently. In terms of sepsis, I'll go briefly through this. This is a huge unmet medical condition. It's a worldwide, some could even define it as a pandemic, a huge market. We have many people are dying from sepsis globally. We're talking about 270,000 patients a year are dying from sepsis in the US. Within sepsis, there are different subtypes of sepsis driven from the different source of infection. just looking at, for instance, urinary tract infection, we have 31% of the case of sepsis patients dying from UTI infection. Um, and currently, we don't have good solution for sepsis. It's still what we do today is treating the symptoms, but we don't have any drug that can actually treat the core of this disease. And the core of the disease is actually a dysregulated immune response. We have an infection, the body's trying to respond, and eventually goes out of control. That is the reason why people are dying. All we know to do today is to treat the infection itself and the symptoms. So Allocetra here is it's a different approach to treat sepsis, and without going too much into the details, during our clinical study, the phase one study, we treated 10 septic patients. We gave Allocetra on top of standard of care, which, as I mentioned, really treat the symptoms. And we had 100% of the patient recovering compared to a control group where 27% of the patients died and only 41% were discharged from the hospital alive and healthy. So this was an initial very, very promising data, and based on it, we designed our phase two study. We announced the 28 days top line data back in April. And the study was designed in a way that patients received Allocetra on top of standard of care and compared to a control group that received placebo. And when we opened, this was a phase two randomized controlled blinded study. When we opened the data, we looked at the demographics of the patient. We saw that in many aspects, there were similarities between the control group and the Allocetra, as one would expect, except of the fact that the patient in the Allocetra group had higher, were more severe patients. So more patients were in septic shock, more patients were on invasive ventilation. Eventually, um, much more severe patient with higher likelihood for complications and mortality. In terms of what we call the SOFA score, which is the organ state of those patients, higher score means that patients are at more difficult condition. And when we looked at the patients that were treated with Allocetra and different source of sepsis, we saw an improvement in all aspects, 90% reduction in their complexity of the organ failure, 68% for patients with respiratory sepsis, and so on. Overall, very, very good data. When we looked at specific subgroups, we saw that in the UTI patients, the high risk UTI patients, they had uh, following treatment with Allocetra, 25% reduction in their organ failure score over placebo. This was a small group, and we're still following those population. And when we looked at the average in general, we didn't see an improvement compared to placebo. Only that high grade UTI sepsis population. Now, this is again in light of the fact that we saw that our treated population were more severe. This for us was an initial indication for the efficacy of Allocetra. And since then, we are following those patients. We will complete the follow-up by the end of this year and beginning of next year. And we're planning to do an additional interpretation of the 1 year follow-up data in Q1 25. Now, another very, very important thing to say is that we saw that there was a very good safety profile. And again, in this study, there were more than 70 patients that were treated with Allocetra. So, considering the fact that this is a platform, this was, again, a very positive signal, which has potential application to all other indications where we're evaluating Allocetra. We're hopeful that the data following 12 months follow-up will support the initial finding of potential efficacy in UTI high-risk population. And once we'll have that data, we'll decide what will be the next step in terms of looking for a partner and collaborating with a partner for follow-up phase 2, 3 study. and so on. As we announced before initiating the study, and Enlivex is not capable to take that indication all the way to phase three. This is a very expensive indication, and we will look for a partner in order to continue development in sepsis. Moving on to osteoarthritis. So, for those of you who are less familiar, osteoarthritis is um, the most common arthritis, life debilitating arthritis globally. It's really, again, a huge indication with no effective treatment. So, what we're talking about here is basically a condition where we have cartilage damage and cartilage degradation that eventually lead to the fact that those patients become um, chronic patients, eventually leading to a knee replacement surgery, as we don't have really good solution to treat that disease. So, in terms of size of this market, in the US only, we have an estimated number of about 32 million adults suffering from osteoarthritis. The most common joint is the knee, but we know that there's also osteoarthritis. Patients are suffering from osteoarthritis in the hip and the basal thumb, and so on. So in terms of market size, the market size for osteoarthritis is huge. But currently, the evaluation is about 7 billion, and it's expected to grow all the way to more than 15 billion by 2030. And as I said, all we have today, the standard of care, is different aspects trying to treat the symptoms and eventually a surgery. So, although this is a cartilage degradation disease, eventually now we know these days that macrophages play a pivotal role in osteoarthritis, and they actually trigger the inflammatory condition. It's a low-grade inflammatory condition, but they trigger and they play a role in that low-grade inflammatory condition that leads to cartilage degradation, recruiting additional macrophages into the joint that eventually increase the inflammatory state within the joint, leading to more cartilage degradation and so on. So, um, when we realized that macrophages play such a pivotal role in osteoarthritis, for us, it was a clear signal that this is the next indication, arthritis in general, and osteoarthritis specifically, that we need to pursue using our Allocetra platform. And this is exactly what we did. So, a few years ago, I'll just say that we had a compassionate treatment, and this was a patient with a very severe form of osteoarthritis. She was in and out of the hospital for few years, actually 9 months in a row prior to treatment. And physician lost, they tried everything and it didn't work, so they approached us and asked us to try if we can inject Allocetra into our shoulder and see if we get resolution of our state and the inflammatory state. Eventually, following 5 injections, that patient had a complete resolution of her state. She got discharged from the hospital with all inflammatory markers going down, and we've been following for 4 years, and she's still okay. So for us, that was a single case, but it was so clear that there's something here, and we have to continue the development of Allocetra for osteoarthritis. And this is exactly what we did. We started off with end-stage osteoarthritis patient. End-stage means that those patients are actually indicated already for knee replacement surgery. We offered them Allocetra in lieu of their surgery. And in that study, and we published that data a few months ago, the first 9 patients had a significant reduction in their pain with a very, very, very favorable safety profile. This was the first study where, beside the compassionate treatment I described, where we injected Allocetra locally. So 51% pain reduction, 2 out of 9 had a complete pain resolution, and only 1 patient out of those 9 eventually continued to knee replacement surgery. So this was very, very promising data for us. And we moved on to the largest study that we're currently running and published data today. So this study is a phase 1/2 study. It's a randomized control, double-blind, statistically powered, multi-country study designed to show the safety and efficacy of Allocetra. The first part was a phase 1 safety running where we injected Allocetra at different doses, escalating doses, in order to get the safe dose and the dose regimen that will continue into the phase two part of the study, which in the bottom here was a phase two. This is a phase two randomized blinded controlled study. So the data that we published today is actually from the first stage of the study, and I'll walk you a little bit through the finding that we had. So this is from the first 12 patients receiving 3 injections of Allocetra, and we measured their pain reporting in different ways, and compare that to their baseline reporting. So what you see on the right-hand side of this graph is the pre-treatment pain. And you can see that the average pain reporting at the scale of 0 to 10 was 6.1, with the lowest reported pain at 4.7 and the highest at 8.2. Now, following 3 injections of Allocetra and 3 months follow-up, they did an additional assessment of their pain, and the average pain dropped to 2.94, which is on average 50% pain reduction. And the lowest pain reported was 0.14. So this is completely, almost complete relief of their pain reporting, and the highest was 6.29. We also measured function using a validated questionnaire called WOMAC, and we measured stiffness using that same questionnaire, and again had more than 40% drop in their report, in their stiffness reporting, and function drop pain report. Sorry, function score reporting was dropped in a way that means that they are much more function, that they're higher, have higher functionality. All of this is extremely, extremely encouraging for us. That was also, we also did an analysis of what we defined as responders. Any patient that had more than 40% pain relief in their pain reports was considered responders. And you can see that 83% out of 12 patients, 10 out of 12, was actually responders. So this is on top of everything we talked about before, we announced before about the safety profile of Allocetra in those patients. So there was no severe adverse events. Basically, the safety profile was such that an independent safety committee recommended to continue the phase two part of the study, and which we are now running. In the other studies, and I'll try to move a little bit faster here. As I mentioned, we are doing the basal thumb osteoarthritis study. This joint, that the hand is actually the third most common joint suffering from osteoarthritis. We're now completing the safety running part of the study, and we'll soon probably move into the phase two part of the study. This study is ongoing within the expected timelines. And as I said, we already initiated the phase one in psoriatic arthritis. So in terms of what will be the catalyst and what are our expectations for 2025. So we talked about sepsis. We're going to do in Q1 the analysis, and based on that, we'll decide how to move on with the sepsis program. Probably looking for a partner, assuming that we get again, supportive data to the initial efficacy that we saw in UTI high-risk population. In the moderate knee osteoarthritis, so we're moving, as you can see, as planned. We already initiated the phase two part of the study. We're expecting to have the 3 months readouts in Q3, and the top-line data from the 6 month follow-up in Q4. The end stage, we've announced already the initial. We're still following this patient. We're expecting in Q1 to have an additional update on the status of the patient in this study. And the basal thumb osteoarthritis, we're expecting to have a readout from the randomized part of the study, the phase two part of the study in Q2, Q3 2025. And for the 6 months data in Q3, Q4 2025. So as you can see, we have several potential catalysts coming on. We are way on track in our reported timelines and our expectations for getting into those clinical readouts. And in terms of the financial, um, our cash runway is expected to run all the way to the end of 2026 to cover all of the activities I just described. Um, And in summary, I think that the those of you who have been following Enlivex in the last few years, you can see that we're moving ahead quite aggressively, promoting our clinical development programs. And we already generated initial efficacy data now in osteoarthritis, and we are very, very excited considering the platform that this is a platform. We're very excited about the potential implication of this data, both from the safety perspective and from the efficacy perspective on the additional programs that we're currently running. Um, And for us being in a situation where we are well financed to cover all of those activities all the way to the end of 2026 is definitely something that we are very, very optimistic about the future of Enlivex in the coming in the near and long term future. I'll say a few words about maybe a few words about the recent announcement about the Bitcoin strategy, treasury strategy. So, we've been following the Bitcoin for quite a long time with the recent approval of the ETFs and actual additional aspects that occurred in the last few months, including Trump's election and so on. Um, but mostly because of the economical changes that we've all been experiencing the last 4 years, mostly post-COVID times. For us, it is an additional risk diversification, a financial approach. And we're doing this in a very caution way. We've announced of up to $1 million allocating up to $1 million, which is less than 4% of our capital, um, into the Bitcoin. I think that considering the fact that it really has different characteristics, it's more resilient to the geopolitical risks and changes that we've been all experiencing. We think that this is a very risk diversifying approach to our capital strategy. It doesn't change anything about our focus as a biotech company, but it does provide an additional, um, um, uh, pathway for us to manage our capital. Um, I guess I'll conclude with that, and we are have any questions, I'm open to address them.
Thank you very much, Oren. Please type in your questions. Click that Q&A button to begin. Please do not use the raise hand tool today as we will not be taking spoken questions. Oren, could you elaborate on the key takeaways from the recent positive interim results for Allocetra in knee osteoarthritis, especially the significant reductions in pain and improved functionality observed at 3 months?
Sure. So this is extremely important data because it actually all the key efficacy endpoints that we described, just described and are well described in our press release are the same ones that will be measured for the randomized part of the study. So it's indicative of the potential outcome that we might see in the randomized part, the phase 2 of the study. And definitely, since again, as I mentioned before, this is a platform, is extremely relevant for all the other arthritis studies that are currently open, whether it's the end stage or the basal thumb. And as such, we are very, very excited about the data. and its potential implication on the additional outcomes from the additional studies.
The interim data shows a favorable safety profile for Allocetra. How does this profile compare with current therapeutic options, and what implications does this have for patient adoption and long-term outcomes?
Yeah, well, clearly this is, you want to have an efficacious drug, but you start with the safety. This was the first two studies now that we've injected Allocetra locally directly into the joint, and therefore for us generating additional safety profile, which kind of continue what we saw in the sepsis, the COVID studies, where definitely we're talking about much more um, systemic exposure. This was the first time we administered Allocetra locally, and the fact that we continue to see this safety profile, this very good safety profile, is extremely important for us for all the studies that we're currently running this with this platform, and that's it.
Does the versatility of Allocetra's macrophage reprogramming mechanism position Enlivex to target additional indications in the future?
That's a good question. So I think I've talked about it several times before, and every time we speak about it, we can see that we're doing additional studies in new programs. Also, psoriatic arthritis is just the recent one. Yes, definitely. I mean, Allocetra is suitable. The mechanism of action, the concept is suitable for many different indications. There is a limited amount of what we at Enlivex can currently manage, but definitely with more data coming out, such as the one we announced today, that will allow us to potentially at the later stage pursue additional relevant indications, and there are many.
What are the next key milestones in the phase 2 stages of your clinical trials?
So, we've already opened the phase two, as we've announced recently. I can generally say that we are well on track, and therefore the next milestone will be the 3 months top line data that we expect to be available. As I said, that Q3 3 months data will be Q3 2025. On Will continue as, of course, to follow the patient from the phase one part of that study. So the ones that we just reported about the 12 months data, will continue to follow them. It will be followed for 6 months and 12 months. So that's something that will potentially could be able to evaluate and discuss at a later stage. But the readout from the phase two randomized part is expected at Q3 2025 and Q4 2025 this year. That's actually just around the corner.
Are there any updates on potential collaborations or partnerships to enhance the development and commercialization of Allocetra?
So in sepsis, that's something that we're doing in the background, but we are waiting for the data. In terms of other partnership, that's something that we're currently always working on. And once there is something to announce, we'll announce it. I think it is important to understand that for the osteoarthritis, it's something that we are capable, most probably, to continue into a phase two, three study, either ourselves or with a partner. But as we did in our previous company, myself and the Enlivex chairman Shai Novik, we've eventually partnered with Pfizer following a very successful phase two study. Once we had that data from a randomized controlled study, we were able to do a very, very positive deal with Pfizer. And we're following the same approach. We're very much focused on generating clinical, meaningful data. And I think you can see today that we're moving with the programs and plans we've described to you. And and once we'll have that data, I'm very positive that we'll be able um, to use that data in order to potentially collaborate with, you know, with different partners. But currently, the focus is really on continue to execute our plans and generating clinical data.
With a strong cash balance projected to support operations through 2026, how are you prioritizing resource allocation among your various clinical programs?
That sounds like a question from somebody who is a CFO or something. So yeah, that that's part of what we do. We've been in the business for quite a long time. I think the first and most important thing to say is that all the programs that I've described today, and really there's a lot of going on which is not discussed in this type of webinars and Q&As related to the manufacturing of the drug, related to the quality of the drug and the preclinical, all of those things still we're still moving forward with them. But we are well funded to cover all of the different activities I've just described. So we don't really need to prioritize. We actually prioritize the plans according to our budget. And now everything is laid out in terms of our the plans for the coming 2 years. And we prioritize them actually just by deciding in advance which programs are we pursuing and which programs we discontinue. As you all know, we had programs, for instance, in oncology that we decided to discontinue. That was the way we prioritize and our plans and cash.
Does the company intend to pursue licensing or other forms of partnership for the oncology vertical to create non-dilutive capital?
Yeah, so as I said before, that's something that we are working on. Whether eventually it'll be translated into an actual partnership or no or not, I cannot commit. Um, but but it's something that is optional. Yeah.
Why the Bitcoin strategy? Bitcoin is extremely volatile, and Enlivex is not a cash generating company. Shouldn't it be conserving its cash?
Well, that's a very good question. I tried to explain it. Bitcoin is not the conventional, conservative, standard um, cash strategy, I guess, capital strategy. But if you look at was happening here in the last few years, and mainly in the last 1 or 2 years, you can see actually that many major institutional investors and companies began incorporating Bitcoin as part of financial strategies. And this is no coincidence. Bitcoin has, its decentralized nature, the fact that it has limited supply, the fact that it's a, more resilient to economic volatility, to geopolitical currency changes, the interest dramatic changes that we're all experiencing, and so on, made it um, an additional tool as part of company treasury strategy. So, just ignoring that, well, it doesn't make sense anymore. And we've been evaluating that for quite a long time. And I think now for us, it made a lot of sense to allocate a small part of our strategic capital management to the Bitcoin. We saw the beginning of this year, the approval of the ETF by the SEC. Even Trump's election is signaling more positive towards the Bitcoin and in general. So for us, it made a lot of sense, and we're doing. It doesn't change our focus, but it's definitely something that we are very aware of what's happening around us, and we are responding to that.
Are you considering the sale of the drug info to others? How long will it take for the major players to acknowledge its superiority and look to buy it for us?
So I think I've described this just before, right? I think that we've been doing this for quite a long time. I think that since we've collaborated, and I collaborated in Shy in the past with Pfizer, where I personally worked with Pfizer for many years, I know how big pharma mindset is and what are they looking for in order to partner with a company like Enlivex. And in the background, we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that we can uh, meet the expectations of such big pharma. But eventually, you want to have data from clinical randomized studies. And that's exactly where we're heading. So I think that I cannot commit to timelines in that sense, but what I can commit is where we're all fully focused on um, on generating data, clinical data, but also much more comprehensive a package that will be of interest and will allow us to discuss with Big Pharma on the different programs.
Thank you very much, Oren. We are coming up to our 45-minute hard stop. For more information on Enlivex Therapeutics, reach us at 1-800-REDSHIP, that's 1-800-733-2447, or email us at enlv@redship.com. Please visit the information page created by RedShip for Enlivex. It's enlvinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on Enlivex. Please watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedShip's program featuring exciting small cap companies, including occasionally Enlivex, every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg USA. Join RedShip's forthcoming webinars, VC Health today at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern, Green Power Motor Company tomorrow at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern, ASP Isotopes Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and Alta Global Group Thursday at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Register for those events and for all RedShip webinars at redship.com/events, where you can also view an archived version of today's Enlivex webinar. Thank you again to our many participants today, and thank you very much, Oren.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is an exciting day, and we look forward to 2025 with all the catalysts and clinical readouts that we have. And for additional webinars like that, we can discuss additional clinical data. Thank you all.